Welcome back to 10 Cents Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Breault, and this week again, I have taken over the podcast. Adam is busy, and Christina's been able to give us a little bit of her time, so I'm lucky enough to sit down and talk to Christina Lam. And if you're not familiar with who she is, Christina Lam is a Skip Barber Racing instructor and an SCCA and NASA road racer. She made it on the podium 7 times in 2019, and she has also done some endurance racing with American Endurance Racing and PBOC. Her teams have won 4 times and podiumed 5 times in the 10 races they've entered, so she's had a fair amount of success. Welcome to the show, Christina. Besides what I've just said, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Robert. And I'm so happy to join you on this podcast. I got turned on to 10 Cents Podcast about a year or two ago. James from King of Motorsports was promoting it, and I got turned on to you guys. I really love your stuff, so I'm really happy to join you today. Well,
I appreciate that. Instagram's kind of where I found you. I probably think through James as well. I don't know if he was sharing something you did or just happened to like on the same picture, but yeah, I've kind of been following you through that and been meaning to reach out for quite some time. And yeah, with the whole coronavirus stuff going on, it's been able to give me a chance to sit down and kind of get some interviews that we probably wouldn't normally get during a busy normal racing schedule. So this kind of worked out, even though everything else seems to have not worked out.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, motorsports is such a small world. And it's like, you can like and comment on certain person's picture, and then suddenly you're connected with a bunch of other people, and everyone somehow knows everybody else in some, tiny little way. Coronavirus is really taking a toll on our 2020 season. I know a lot of racers haven't even gotten out to the track yet this year. So I love what you're doing with the podcast. You guys are really ramping it up with the extra downtime. So it's really cool to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky that I've had a bunch of stuff I can do at home, like with the podcast or like with projects and stuff. The cars have been ready, but it's like, well, this event got canceled. Okay, I can do this other thing to the car. Or like I was gonna do one lap of America, and that got canceled. It's like, all right, well, I guess the Z is gonna be running. So then just took that money and put it over there, and so it's like, yeah, sometimes it's kind of a gift or a blessing and a curse. But it's kind of crappy that.
So you could have one really, really fast car at the end of this, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like now I'll actually have 2 running cars. I can go out and use them. But yeah, it sucks that in order to do that, I had to miss months worth of racing. Have you had any track time or anything like that this year?
I have not been to the track at all. Actually, since runoffs last year. I did do one weekend after runoffs, just like as a testing weekend because I had a brand new car. But I have not been to the track. I was actually supposed to go to Road Atlanta right as the pandemic started, and it got canceled. I've just been sitting around at home. There isn't too much to do to my car, so it's literally a brand new build. We have, a weekend and a half on it, so I don't have anything to do to my car. I mean, I don't have any money to spend on my car, but I like, it's a new car. We have nothing to do. I changed the oil. I should probably take the Hoosier H2Os off, and it's about ready to go racing, and so am I. So I'm hoping that we can all hit the track soon. Yep.
Do you have any events scheduled coming up?
It's really just waiting to see what does or doesn't get canceled. I think Roebling is on the schedule for next month, and I haven't heard anything about that. Watkins Glen was supposed to be our first race, but that got canceled. And then I think after Roebling, I don't know, maybe Jersey or Pit Race, something close by, hopefully.
Yeah. So we were supposed to be racing in April, and that got canceled right away. And then we had Blackhawk Farm scheduled up until about like a week before the event. That's supposed to be this coming Friday or this past Friday, depending on when you listen to the show. So that was supposed to happen, and then they canceled it without any warning. So it was just kind of like everyone's prepped, ready to go. Everyone's talking about plans, and then that got pulled out from under us. So hopefully at the end of June, we're going to be at Hallett, Oklahoma, and I'm really looking forward to that. I really like that track.
Yeah, I think by the end of June, I think we'll see a little bit more stability. And I know, tracks are doing their best and organizations are doing their best. We're really in unprecedented times, so they really just have to take it a day at a time. I know, like, Summit Point is open, but they're only allowing, I think, 5 participants on track at a time. So really, really small events or, private member days are being allowed. I think we're going to see stuff slowly start to ramp up, and hopefully a little bit more stability soon.
Yeah. I think once like the national stuff like NASCAR, I guess international Formula One, stuff like that, once you see they find a way to make it work, I think you're going to start seeing that trickle down to the more lower levels. Because even Iowa just this week will be opening up racetracks to more 50% capacity. We've been able to. We did one private test day, and that went pretty good. But yeah, you can only do a handful of cars, and yeah, it's not the same as a race weekend.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So have you always been into motorsports, or was this kind of a spur of the moment thing, and then now it's completely taken over your life?
So I knew nothing about cars when I started this a couple of years ago. I didn't know how to drive manual. I didn't know, I didn't know anything. I bought, an E90 BMW. It was a 328. And, I just bought it because it was a pretty looking car. I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know how to put, air in my tires, I think at the time. The only thing I could do was literally put gas in it and we went to some car shows and I started getting a little bit more into it. But I think, I was literally just a total nub when it came to anything car related. And somehow here I am running, my own race program and competing at the highest levels of club racing in America. And so it's definitely been one heck of a ride.
So then how'd you get that first intro into it? Because I mean, you had a decent car like just to get started with to begin with, like with autocross and stuff like that. I mean, that just happened to be by accident. But like, how did you get that first track day or that first autocross or what happened?
So my first track day was at the Nürburgring.
So you go to like the best track, the one that people travel across the world just to see. It's like, oh, by the way, I just happen to be here. How does that even happen?
So, like I said, I had no interest in cars. I had just bought my nice E90, so I kind of liked it, and I knew I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. But I didn't know how to drive it, so I did an autocross here and there. And I was visiting a friend in Germany, and he said, "Well, you got this new car. It looks really nice." We went to the BMW museum, and it was cool. And he was like, let's go to the Nürburgring. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. And I guess I don't think I appreciated it enough at the time just because I didn't know enough about it. I knew they tested cars there. All these manufacturers had, secret testing sites there, and they were testing tires. But I didn't really appreciate that. This was really somewhere car nerds traveled to, every year to just go see it. And so, we showed up there and we were like, all right, well, let's rent a car and go try to do this. And so I'll preface this with, I did not know how to drive manual at the time. And we rented a manual car. We rented a Suzuki Swift it was a place called Rent for Ring right outside of the entrance. And it was this decked out Suzuki Swift race car. It was caged. It had, race seats in it, had Toyos on it. And I was like, okay. I don't know how to drive manual. So I had a feeling this was going to happen. And I watched a couple of YouTube videos because that's how anybody learns anything these days. And I was like, okay, I understand the process of driving manual. I may not understand how it all works, but I was like, okay, I watched this guy and he was like, okay, clutch in, first gear. And I was like, all right, well, I can do that. And so, I got in this Suzuki Swift race car. And I was like, I'm kind of trying to impress this guy. I don't want to be like, I don't know how to drive manual. So I just kind of faked it and away we went. So yeah, that's how I drove my first track day. I was faking, knowing how to drive manual, and it was at the Nürburgring.
Impressive.
And so talk about diving headfirst into something.
Yeah, no. Well, then and over there, it's a totally different culture because basically it's almost like a toll road. Everyone can just go in, pay their money, and drive the track. I mean, was it really busy when you were there, or was it kind of quiet?
It wasn't too busy. It had actually just rained, and so I think it kind of scared a lot of people away. I was kind of like, I paid all this money to be here and rent this car, so I'm going to drive it because I'm already strapped in. And like you said, it's a toll road. So it was really cool. They give you this little RFID tag and you pull up to the booth and you swipe it and the gate lifts and away you go. And of course, being my first time driving manual, I had a lot of trouble after swiping that card, getting the car rolling again. And so I sat there and the gate had lifted and I'm like trying to find that engagement point, for first gear. And I'm just like revving the piss out of this little Suzuki Swift. And all the Germans are like, what is this Asian girl doing? Does she not know how to drive this car? And I'm just sitting there like, no, I don't know how to drive this car. And I did somewhat of like a weird little front wheel drive burnout and away we went. I will say I'm really proud of the fact that I did not stall the car that day. And so that I think was just the ultimate success.
That would be a success for me. Like if I had never driven it before and the fact that I didn't kill it, that's a victory. Just everything else is icing on the cake, but that right there would be enough for me to call it a successful day. Yeah,
it was really funny. So I paid extra to have an instructor in the car with me. And, you know, he kind of tried to scare me because he was like, oh, you're American and, you know, you guys don't know how to drive. And he's like, you know, people die at this track every year. And if you hit this panel, you have to pay for 13 chunks of this panel. And it's however many thousands of euros. And I look at him and I'm like, dude, like, I've never driven manual before. Like, we're going to just do this, man. Like, you know, you can't really scare me. And he looked at me, he got a little uncomfortable after hearing my driving history. So, but you know, we did really well. He you know, we got through the track, we did a couple times and he gave me a couple hot laps and, you know, at the end of it, he was like, you know, this went a lot better than I thought it would. Cause he was like, people usually try to show off for him and show them their mad driving skills. And I just, you know, I took in whatever he said and he's like, you know, slow down here, turn in. So I just followed exactly what he told me to do. And so he was actually really thrilled with it at the end of it. But it was funny because he, at one point he was like, okay, you're doing really well. And we were approaching this corner and he was like, okay, brake and downshift into third. And I just like looked over at him like, no, we're doing this entire track in fourth gear. Like, I know it's going to bog. Like we did this last time. I was like, let's just try to make it through this. So I would like to go back to the Nürburgring someday and, you know, row through the gears now that I can drive this thing properly. But yeah, so my first day was in fourth gear, in a Suzuki Swift on the Nürburgring. So that's definitely one hell of a track day.
Yeah, that's definitely a place to start. So and yeah, you didn't kill it. You made it all the way through and you didn't scare your instructor too bad.
Yes.
So then you come back and then what's the first thing you do?
The first thing I did was sign up for more autocross, but now like autocross kind of felt like it was like there was more, right? And so I went like head on super deep into autocross. So my daily driver was an E90. It was all-wheel drive. It was automatic. It was clearly not the car to have for autocross. And so at one of the SCCA autocrosses, I met a guy. His name was James Dunham, and he had an MX-5. And it was like fully prepped to STR, yeah. Street Touring Roadster. And he said, you know, hey, I have a daughter who's about your age, and do you want to co-drive with her? And he goes, you know, we're going to do every single event this year. We're going to be at an autocross every single Saturday. And then we're going to go to Nationals, which is out in like Lincoln. And I was like, cool. I was like, I've never done that. I was like, sure, sign me up. So, you know, I then spent the rest of the summer at an autocross every single weekend, every Saturday, every Sunday, wherever we need to be. And it was awesome. And this is where I got a lot of my experience my first year. I still drove my car every now and then at like BMW autocrosses, but we went hard at every single SCCA, the WDCR autocrosses. And, you know, come September, I took a week off work and we went out to Lincoln, Nebraska. And so James had a co-driver and then I co-drove with Mary, which was his daughter. And the four of us, we ripped in this thing like all week long. We did the testing tunes, we did everything. It was so much fun. And that was my gateway drug to the rest of motorsports, because I saw people who just came out with their daily drivers. I saw people who clearly had, you know, $30,000 or $40,000 into an autocross car. And it was just this one big family. And it was amazing. It was just this like week-long party. and cars and party. And it was the best thing ever. And I knew then that I was signing up for something that was going to, be with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't made it out to Lincoln yet, which is kind of a shame because it's, a couple hours down the road. So I really need to make it out there. I know Adam makes it almost every year. So it needs to be on my list. But that's awesome that you would go, like, even your first year, you're just like, do it. Okay, we're going to do it, all of it, and then we're make it all the way out to nationals. How'd you do at nationals in your first year?
I think I placed fifth. So I competed in STRL since we had 4 drivers. And I don't know, there were like maybe 8 or 9 people. So, I had no expectations my first year. I was just like, I was going from nothing to all in. So I was just there to have fun. And, I was really happy with the way I drove. And it was one heck of an experience.
No, that's awesome. That's kind of a pretty steep learning curve to go from never doing it to like, I placed 5th at nationals. No big deal. And then once you got back from nationals, was it like, okay, time to sell this car? I need a track car. Was it then?
Yes. So by that point I was like, okay, I want my own Miata. And I was like, let me get like an NA or NB Miata, because a Miata is the answer to everything.
It's a perfect place to start.
It is.
Really
and
is.
I mean, you can find these things for maybe $2,000 or $3,000, and they might even already have a roll bar in there. And so I was like, okay, that's like my budget is like $2,500. And so I was looking here and there, not too serious. And I was just dead set on having Miata. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And then one day I got a phone call from a friend. It was like in the middle of a work meeting too. He never calls me. And I was like, this is emergency. I was like, let me take this. And he's like, yo, I know you're looking for a Miata, but there's this family that's standing right next to me and they want to sell their E36M3. And I was like, okay, that sounds expensive. I was like, how much? And he's like, well, they're about to trade it into the dealership for $3,500. And, he's like, if you want it, it's yours for $3,000. Cause I kind of told them like what you wanted to do with it. And I was like, okay. I was like, $3,000 for an E36M3. I was like, that sounds like a good deal. So I made an excuse. I left work. And I went directly to the bank and I drove over to Maryland and, I handed, so as a family, they were trading in the car to get their daughter a newer car to go to college in. And it was the dad's car, and Dad said, I've had this car for however many years. And he's like, I bought it when it was brand new from the dealership. It still had the BMW Rockville logo on it. He said, all my kids have driven this car. He's like, I heard you're going to turn it into a race car. And I was like, I'm not really sure how to do that, but I'm probably going to try. Yeah. And so I handed him $3,000 and out of that I got an E36M3. It was a sedan and it was automatic. So I got a BMW, which was still the wrong transmission. But I did some research and some friends said, hey, you can do a swap. You can find all the parts and you can swap it over and make it manual. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll watch some YouTube videos.
It can't be that hard. People do it. It's just nuts and bolts. It's easy.
Yeah. So yeah. And then I drove it home. I didn't really know what to do with it. And I found some Craigslist parts and, I had a lot of good friends that helped me learn how to wrench on a car. I'll be honest, as my first project car, I did not own any tools whatsoever. And this is where like my learning process started for learning to work on my own car, was buying this rickety old BMW. And I, at that point in my life, I was scared of the air compressor because it was loud. And, you laugh at that because you're like, oh, well, that's just like, that's like a standard autocross tool that we have. Like, you got to have an air compressor. You go to the track, there's a big air compressor sitting, on the side of the track. Everyone gets air. And I'll be honest, like, I was so intimidated because the air compressor was loud. And I was like, oh, well, if I could exceed the, 38 PSI that it says on my door, I was like, does my tire blow up? Like, I don't know these things. Which, might show you just how much I didn't know about cars when I first started. So yeah, that's where all of my learning to wrench on came from, my E36.
So you just go to Lowe's, pick up the mechanics intro set, and just get to work?
Pretty much. I mean, there was like the standard stuff that was all wrong with the E36. There was like a hole in the intake boot that, took me a while to find. And then the valve cover gasket was leaking. And, these are all like small, like 15-minute jobs that I can do now. But that first time you do any sort of job on a car, it takes you hours. And you're like, I'm never doing this again. This sucks. And, you have to stop 8 times because you don't have the right tools. And so, man, like, looking back at it, like, that's a tough learning process, like, to not really have family in motorsports and like to help you with it. But, I think I was really lucky. Like, I had some really good friends and, they're still doing car stuff with me today, and they helped me learn a lot of it. And, I think that's just most of what the community is, they're just good friends, and we all just like rickety old cars that we like to make go faster.
Yeah. And that makes it way better. Like, so like, yeah, you could have some horrible experience with it and just call somebody up like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And they come over and you end up knocking it out, and they, they show you how to do it. And they like, that's all automotive school was for me. It's like, I kind of walked into it going, I like cars. I know I want to build cars, but again, I really didn't have a big, a clue about what I was doing. So I walk in there
right.
and again, like, everyone knows more than me. And my teacher's like, no, don't worry. Nobody knows anything yet. It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But yeah, like the motorsports community, when you get around people with the similar interests, it's incredible. Because, yeah, you'll be wrenching at the track or something, or like you could be having like the worst weekend, and someone will come over and be like, hey, man, a competitor will come over and say, hey, can I help? And that's always been just like super cool to me. Like I'm really proud of the way our time trials group is that way. Because like it's all like the toughest competitors that we have right now, we're the ones that go and do private test days together.
Nice.
So it's just, I really like how that community is really growing. Like with Grid Life too, it's like all those guys are friends. Well,
yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that. Most of them are friends, because I know there's a few that don't like each other. So then your E36, what were some of the first things you did once you got it switched over to a manual? Did you go weld in a cage? Like, what was the progression from buying it to, I guess you ended up making it a wheel-to-wheel car, right?
Yeah.
And how?
So,
I'll say, was that like a couple-year process? Was that just like a 1-month process?
So the whole plan to buy a Miata went out the window, and I was really set on making this E36 an autocross car. So I was looking at some different classing instead of STR, and so I was like, all right, let me build an autocross car, and I can still drive it to work. It'll be fun. It'll be a weekend car. And at that point, I had done my first like real HPD, and I did that in my E90, and that was just like one more like level in like the gateway drug there. It was just like, everyone was so nice, and it was my first track day, and it was building on everything I learned at the Nürburgring. I did it at Summit Point on the Shenandoah circuit, and it was very technical, which really suited my car because the E90 is a heavy car, and then the all-wheel drive made it even heavier. And I did it with Porsche Club of America, and so everyone had fancy cars, and so it kind of suited my car, the technical driving, and being the perfectionist that I am, I think it suited me as I was learning that. So I said, all right, let me make the E36 an autocross car. I'll do 1 HPD a year. I said, I want to try like maybe 1 new track every year, and I'll just do like maybe 1 or 2 DEs. I said, this is really great, but it's kind of expensive. And, we'll just keep it at this like nice, fun, easy level. That clearly did not also go as planned. As I quickly was like, okay, well, I want like nice seats, and, I said, if I'm going to do a DE every now and then, I want like full protection, like rollover protection. So I looked at doing either a Bolton or a Weldon bar, and the more I did research, so I'm like one of those people where I feel the need to always if you're going to do it right the first time. That's my motto. So the more I dug into it, the more I was like, well, if I do a Weldon bar, I can build on it to do a full cage. And I was like, no, I won't do the full cage. Maybe somebody else somewhere, in the future when they buy this car will. I was like, but I won't get that far. Those people are nuts. So I welded a cage in. I had a guy in the Virginia area do it. And, I made sure I had the harnesses, everything was set up right. And I did my first HPD in the E36. And then I was like, I got budget to do another one this year. And somehow I ended up doing like 3 or 4 that year. I was like, oh, this was really fun. And I noticed I was doing like a little bit less autocross, just trying to balance the budget and everything. And so similar to my first year of autocross where I went head on and did every single event I possibly could, my first real year with the E36, it was the same thing. I tried to do as much as I possibly could. And any waking, breathing moment was me looking at tracks or me looking at what's the next event that I can get to. So that spiraled out of control very quickly. And, I kept the car pretty simple. I found like suspension that was on sale. I found it like this weird Craigslist deal. It was a little shady. But I don't know what Craigslist deal isn't shady.
They're
right?
all a little shady.
Yeah. Like some guy was selling these like brand new, they were like brand new Bilsteins. They were PSS 9s. And so I was like, oh, they're pretty good. But he was selling them for like some stupid price. Like it was like $700 or $800. And I was like, that's like a $2,000 suspension. And so like, yeah, I met him in like the back of an alley or something. And I handed him cash and I grabbed the box and ran away as quickly as I could. And that box is really big and heavy. So yeah, there were a lot of weird Craigslist transactions to get really nice parts for my car. And it was cool. My friends taught me how to do the suspension on my car. My friend Jake, he is also a official with NASA, and he invited me over. He had an E36 M3 as well. Funny story. So I actually met him because he had posted something online and was like, hey, I need to borrow or buy like a corner marker for an E36 sedan. But I guess because the sedan and coupe, they don't have the same one. So like no one had it because everyone had a coupe. And I was like, I have the same car. I was like, you can just borrow it off my car if you just need it for the weekend. And so he came over and I explained to him like what I was trying to do with the car. And he was like, that's so cool. He's like, I actually work for NASA, which is an organization that does HPDs. And so that's how I got even deeper, is like I slowly found friends that were doing HPDs and involved. And so Jake taught me how to do the entire suspension on my car and install this really nice set of Bilsteins that I got for like $700 or $800 in the back of an alley. And so, I took it over to his house one day and we put it on jack stands and he was doing one side. And so I would always make sure I was like one step behind him. So I would watch what he was doing. And then, I would do it on my side, and just be one step behind, just always following exactly what he was doing. So doing that, I learned how to do the suspension on my car, which now is like no big deal. But the first time I did it, it was like an 8-hour ordeal. And I was like, wow, this sucks. But now it's like, okay, I can drop the suspension in like 45 minutes.
Yeah. The first time's always the problem. Like once you understand how it works, no problem anytime after that.
Oh yeah.
And that's the perfect way to do it too. Like if he's doing one side, you're doing the other, you can just kind of like peek over, okay, mirror what he's doing. And then just, any quick question. Hey, why is this not just falling out? Oh, yeah. Because of this. It's just that's a really great way to learn. And then actually make sure you get it right. Because like with suspension or brakes, those are the things you don't want to get wrong. Oh yeah,
and you don't need any of that falling off.
No. And I was reading your article on. Like we're gonna kind of bounce back and forth here for a second. On Grassroots Motorsports. Is this the car that had the cage that had to be redone?
Yes, it is.
That's one of the scariest pictures I've ever seen. And it's always my worst nightmare. Like for anyone to come to the track day or like a time trials or like if I have somebody do my cage, that's always my biggest fear. So like, I guess what happened?
So the guy who did my roll bar, I eventually went back to him and said, hey, I'm clearly a lot deeper into this hobby than I expected. Let's go forward with that plan and put in that whole cage that you said you could just build upon. So he said, no problem. And, I think he's so I'll start off with, he's no longer in the cage making business. And I did talk to him about the issues that came up with his cage. So a little bit of background info, if you guys haven't read the article. I found out that the cage on my E36 was cocked together. There were most of it was welded, and then there were large 180-degree seams that were not welded, and they were filled with some, like, it was like a seam sealer, I think he said. And I wasn't very happy about it. But so I actually drove around with this cage for like a year and a half, maybe. And I did not know that it was not fully welded together. When I decided to go wheel-to-wheel racing, I took the car to High Speed Motorsports and I had them redo the entire car because I was like, I want a competitive GTS2 car. Like, I want the best car on grid. So I brought my car to them and they said, all right, let's do this. And one of the things they quickly noticed was, hey, there's something about this weld that looks a little weird. And so when I got the cage back, when it was originally done, there were some of the joints that were already painted. And not all of them were painted, but like some of them were, like, they were sprayed with primer. And I was told, like, oh, we painted them so that they wouldn't rust. And in the back of my head, it always sat kind of weird that some of the joints were painted and some of them weren't. But
just a quick red flag.
Yeah, I didn't question it. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'll just, paint the whole cage. It's fine. But High Speed Motorsports, they quickly recognized, like, hey, there's a little bit of an issue here. And they sent me pictures and they said, hey, we're able to scratch away some of these welds with a screwdriver.
Ugh.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this is a very serious repair, clearly, and maybe I'm not racing anytime soon. But they actually went through the entire cage and they inspected every single weld on that thing. And anything that had seam sealer on it, they repaired and they welded fully. So I did not hesitate to take that thing racing because structurally, like, that, it was designed very well. And I think it's just a shame that there were some shortcuts that were taken there because it's a nice cage. And now it's welded, it's even nicer. But I think, I don't know, people could maybe just get tired of the stuff they do and take some shortcuts and they think maybe no one will notice. And I'll be honest, I didn't notice because I didn't think to check. But so that's kind of why when I did my next cage, High Speed Motorsports did it, it was like a done deal. I was like, there's no way, anyone else is going to touch this car. And just the fact that they were able to recognize, like, little things like that and from afar say, hey, that doesn't really look right. There's just a lot of attention to detail. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's good that you caught it before it became an actual incident. Cause, like, it's too scary to think about what would happen in, like, just one accident. So it's very important to double check anything that has to do with safety.
Yeah.
So then you get this car, now you got it, it's safe. How, like, were you time trials with it? Like, how long did you do that? And then or was it just kind of like a 1 year thing? It's like, all right, well, wheel to wheel, here we come.
So I did HP for, I want to say, like, maybe 2 years. Like, my first year I did, a bunch of Ds, and by the end of the first year, they said, hey, you're clear for DE3. And I was kind of like, oh, whoa. I was like, that's kind of moving fast. And, everyone was like, no. They're like, you're ready. And I was like, oh, all right, whatever. And so the second year I did mostly DE. And then I was like, you know what? I was like, let me try this time trial stuff that NASA has. I had a couple of friends that did it, and it looked like fun. It was a little bit more competitive. And I think up until then, like, I don't think I ever really timed myself. I timed myself, like, for autocross, right? They give you time at the end. But in DE, they're always, like, really adamant, like, it's not a competition, it's not a race. And so, like, I always took that to heart, and I was always just focused on my own driving, which I think probably helped me in the long run, because I wasn't ever comparing myself against anybody else. I was just focused on my own thing. And so when I got to time trial, I was like, cool. I was like, now I get to compete against people. And, I think I did really well, like, my first year, and, racked up a couple of podiums, and it was just fun. Like, the time trial crowd was like, it's a little bit more serious in some sense, but like everyone still just kind of jokes around, and it is just one big party. And it's like you said, when competitors help each other, that's when you have a really, really good group. And that's what we had in NASA time trial. So I really liked it. And, it's funny. I always said that I would never take the next step, right? So when I was in D, I was like, oh, like those time trialers are nuts. Like they're so serious, and they're always trying to like win tires or like win brakes and do all this. I was like, man, they're really serious. I was like, I would never do that. But I said the same thing when I was autocrossing. I was like, man, those people out at the track every weekend, I was like, they spend so much money. I was like, those people are nuts. I would never do that. So here I am now time trialing, and I was sitting shotgun with a friend, and he flew off the track, and I said something. I was like, I knew you were going to fly off track, like, way back there. I was like, I could already tell you, like, you weren't on the right line, and, you didn't notice. And he was like, you should really instruct. And I was like, nah, I would never do that. Those people are nuts.
I'm picking up on a theme here.
Yeah. So about a month later, I did instructor clinic, and now I was instructing and time trialing. And suddenly this whole new world opened up for me, because instructing was really fun. So sitting shotgun with somebody who is so overwhelmed with their first track day, and you're trying to verbally keep this, 3,000 pound car on track. Yeah, that'll get your blood flowing. But this whole new world opened up to me because I loved instructing. And then all of a sudden my fees were comped for instructing. So if you're not familiar, I mean, if you instruct, you usually get your fees comped as part of your payment, right, for instructing. And so suddenly budget, just opened up. Like I could, the biggest expense is the entry fee, which often goes anywhere from $350 to $500, depending on the track, the weekend, how many days. So that's the biggest part of the puzzle there.
Yeah. And that's just the cost of entry. Then, you got all the consumables and gas and like,
oh yeah.
Then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, this is a $1,500 weekend. I mean,
yeah.
So if you can take a third of that away, it cuts the cost dramatically.
Hell yeah. So I, like autocross, I started to be at the track every single weekend. And I loved instructing. I loved sitting shotgun. And all of a sudden I could go try all these new tracks too. And so I started traveling up north, because I was like, okay, I live in Mid-Atlantic. I do Summit and VIR a lot. I was like, let me try new tracks. I was like, I love trying new things. And, I clearly, I just kind of go all in. So then I was like, oh, let me try Jersey. And then I was like, oh, there's 2 tracks at Jersey. I was like, I need to do both. And then I was like, oh, that group's going to like Lime Rock. I was like, I've never been there either. So I was like, yeah, sure. Let's drive 10 hours like north, and let's go try that, and Watkins Glen. And then I think Palmer opened that year. And so it was just a bunch of new tracks that year. I think maybe 9 new tracks. And
that's a lot of new tracks for 1 year.
It is, because I think most full race seasons are only like maybe 5 race weekends.
Right.
So yeah, it was a lot, but I think again, kind of like autocross, that helped me in the long run, because now whenever I go to a new track that I have never been at, people underestimate me because they're like, oh, that girl's never been here before. Like we've never seen her around. And then I go and I learn it, because I'm like, okay, well, I have the autocross background where you walk the track, you have to learn it. You only get a couple shots at it. And because I did so many new tracks that first year, it helped me learn stuff really quickly. And so I think competitors get a little surprised when I show up like in a different region, and they just kind of underestimate me, probably because I'm a girl, and then also because I've never been there before.
So do you do any sim racing or any sort of like pre-race prep before you get to a track? Or is it more like, do you just take that autocross mentality where it's like, I'll walk the track, I got this?
So I have tried a lot of iRacing, and before my first ever wheel-to-wheel race, I practiced Watkins Glen for hours. I had never been there, so I had no idea what I was in for. It was with American Endurance Racing, and it was the first time I was wheel-to-wheel racing. It was the first time I was racing somebody else's car, which was kind of big. It was my first time at Watkins Glen, one of probably the fastest and scariest tracks. So I did a ton of iRacing. And when I got there, I was like, this is totally different and not what I expected. I was like, these S's are really serious. And going back after having been to a track in person, iRacing definitely helps. And I do use it every now and then for practice. But I don't know, maybe it's just like the way I look at like landmarks or something. I don't know. I kind of struggle using iRacing to learn a track. I have no idea of where I am, to be totally honest.
No, I get it. Like it's you like I struggle with iRacing just because I can't feel anything. I do a really bad job of following where I'm supposed to be going, and my graphics aren't great to begin with, so it's not helping at all. But like I've talked about this before, where it's like I spent a lot of time in not iRacing, but R Factor with a car that was totally different than what I was actually driving. So I got used to what that car was doing and where my shift points were, and like how to brake, which is a really great way to end up in the tire wall. So,
yeah.
So I have a love-hate relationship with sim racing, and I've gotten way more into it. Obviously, with coronavirus and stuff, I've done it more in the last few months than I have in the last few years. But like having that ability to go to a track and take that autocrosser mentality and use that to just learn the track, know where you're going to be looking, have your eyes up, and know it right off the bat. That's a priceless skill that a lot of people don't have. So I mean,
I'm really thankful for my background, and I just, I think it just when I jumped into the whole thing, I didn't think about it, and that's how I learned the whole sport, and so that's how I still approach a lot of the challenges that I face.
So then, was endurance racing your first step from time trials or DE into wheel to wheel?
So yes, endurance racing, that first weekend at Watkins Glen in a rented E30 was my first ever wheel-to-wheel race. And that was really intimidating. I actually walked away from that weekend saying, holy crap, like, I am not cut out for this. Granted, I was in that time trial stage where I was like, oh, I'm never going to race. Like, those people are nuts. But I was like, okay, let me just try it to make sure I think those people are nuts. And so I think in part was I let myself be overwhelmed with too much. I probably should have picked a track that I had been to, probably should have picked a car I was familiar with. And so, I was going from an E36 M3, which has a decent amount of power, to an E30. And so, you're going from 230 horsepower to 140 on a good day, and pushing, 65 miles an hour up the S's if you're flat out. And AER, there's a bunch of different classes, right? So we were in the slowest class. And so there were like Mustangs and Corvettes, and there were E46 M3s with like stroker motors, like just blaring by, and just like the speed discrepancy was crazy to me. And it's just something you don't really experience in time trial, because in time trial, they line you up from fastest to slowest. You're not supposed to trip over each other. You're not supposed to have to do too many passes, just because every pass kind of costs you time. And in time trial, you want that perfect lap. So it was interesting to me. And it was just I felt like that kid in HPD that didn't quite understand that there, like, you got to do the point buys, and there was just like a lot of cars behind me and passing me out like all the time. So that was like a total, that was a total mistake on my part. I should have probably picked some things that I was a little bit more familiar with, but similar to my history, I just went all in. And I was really not thrilled with how that weekend went. I wasn't familiar with the car, so I just felt like I wasn't hitting my marks, and I was really struggling with the amount of power in the car. It was a different driving style. You really have to thrash those E30s, and it's just not something I was comfortable doing in somebody else's car. So that was my first wheel-to-wheel weekend, and I was like, I don't think I'm cut out for this. Like, I don't think I'm going to go back.
So I think that's like it shows for the first time you go to it and it's like, well, maybe this isn't quite for me. But what changed? So what brought you back?
So I went back to doing time trial for the rest of the year because I still had my E36M3, and I ran into a lot of mechanical issues with my car. I had a head gasket leak early in the season, and I had somebody redo the head gasket. And after that, like, the car was just not the same. And you know that feeling when you know your own car and you're like, it's down on power, and all your friends who are competitors are like, no, you're fine. Like, it's all in your head. So I went through that for probably 3 months, which drove me up a wall. Because, by that point I had data, and I was looking at the AIM data, and I was like, the math doesn't add up, guys. I was like, if I pull the restrictor plate, I'm like 8 miles an hour down on my previous best run, which was last year in DE3, when I had more power. And I was like, guys, it doesn't make sense. And everyone was like, no, you're fine. And so I was at wit's end. I was trying everything. And there, at that point, there was still a limit to my mechanical abilities. I wasn't going to drop the diff and rebuild it, because that was just way beyond what I was going to do at the time. And I was kind of like, okay, I was like, this car is driving me nuts. And it actually got to the point where I hated the car. I hated everything about it. And I was like, I want to sell it, and I want to just get something different. But then I was like, I can't sell it knowing that there's something wrong with it. And so, I kept at it for 3 months. I was in the garage every single night after dinner, and it was this car was driving me to tears. And I was like, okay, you know what? I was like, I need to send this car to someone who actually knows what they're doing, and is not just YouTubing, putting a track car together. And so, there's a lot of shops at the track. And so I was like, all right, High Speed Motorsports has a bunch of cars that they bring, and they win. I was like, okay, so someone knows what they're doing there. And I had talked to the owner there, Hugh Stewart, and so he's a good guy, really, really nice guy. And I think I talked to a bunch of shops before deciding, and so I was like, Hugh, I was like, let's make this into so it started off as, let's fix the car, whatever is wrong with it, let's fix it. Because I was like, I'm going to keep time trialing. And then he said, okay. He said, are you sure? For the amount of money we're probably going to spend fixing it, we can just redo a large portion of it, and you can have a really, really badass race car. And so, we talked budget, and he was like, yeah, he was like, easily, we can do all of that within your budget, and, just tell me what you want. And I was like, okay, let's go racing. So, I sent my car to him, and he was like, okay, we're going to redo everything. We're going to put new suspension in it. We're going to do motion controls. At first I was like, oh, let's do the 2A non-remote for my budget. And then as I got thinking and doing my own research, I was like, no, let's do the remotes. And, he built me a custom diff. We basically redid the entire car that winter. And by we, I mean he. But, he'd send me pictures, and I was like, wow, this looks really cool. He put the hard motorsport flares on there. And, he found some issues with my car along the way. Some of the stuff was self-induced. It's just my poor wrenching skills and lack of knowledge. Other things like the cage were just things that no one knew about.
Right.
And sure enough, spring of 2017 rolls around, and he's like, all right. He's like, come pick up your car. We're going to Jersey next week. The whole team's going testing. And I was like, okay.
So did you have a class in mind, or was it just kind of fix it and then just kind of see where it ended up? Or I guess what did you have a goal with it at that point?
So he had other customers that were racing in German Touring Series. So it's a power to weight ratio class, and that's pretty much the only rule. There's no tire size limit. There's nothing else. It's gotten a little bit more complex, but you can literally do anything as long as you meet the power to weight ratio. You can add whatever aero you want or lack of aero you want. You can take any approach to the car you want. And they, Hugh had told me, hey, we're going to try something new with these cars this winter. and I saw that he was doing another GTS2 car, Dan Hardick's car. And I was like, oh, that looks really cool. I was like, yeah, I was like, do the same thing. I was like, I want the same thing. So I already knew going into it that, all right, this was going to be a GTS2 car at the end of it. And I think at that point they had GTS cars in every single class, like GTS 2, 3, 4. There was probably a high-speed car in every single one of those.
Nice. So then now, how did the test go? How did your first season go? So the first test was awesome. Everything that I complained about the car before, like any sort of understeer. So Hugh has this like secret sauce, like bump steer that he makes in-house. And there's like kits and stuff, but like he does his own. He puts a lot of research and time into the stuff he does. So there's a lot of like little secret parts that go into his cars, which I really like. It's not just like an off the shelf, everyone else has the same parts. Right.
So everything was different about the car. Like the car turned on a dime. It was beautiful. It was my first time with aero. It had a wing on the back. It had canards, had a nice big splitter. And it was awesome. And so I had someone to compare against because Dan's car was also done at that point. And, I was like 2 seconds off his pace. It was my first time driving it. I was like, all right, it's fine. And I was like, I'll figure it out, as the season goes along. And so I think Dan had a couple of issues with his car and he parked it and he was in the paddock. It was an open track day with Jeffapalooza. And, I was like, all right, I'm going to take one more run. And then I was like, I'm probably going to call it a day. I was like, let me just do another couple laps. And, I was like, I'll probably pack up. And so I'm like doing a couple more laps. I'm like, all right, this feels great. Like my times are coming down. And, I go under the bridge at, it was Thunderbolt, under the bridge at Thunderbolt. And I was like, all right, last lap and I'll cool it down and I'll bring it in. And the car starts to misfire and it's like a really bad misfire. Right. And I was like, that's
not good.
I was like, I hadn't heard anything like that before. I was like, no, I think it's just a misfire. And then the car dies.
Oh no.
Like halfway down the front straight. And I was like, oh, I was like trying to refire it up and I got nothing. So I pulled off to the side and Evie towed me in and then he was like looking at my car and he's like, oh, you blew a head gasket. And I was like, no, I literally just paid a guy to do that. Like,
this
3 months ago.
It's a brand new one.
Yeah. And so I was like, I literally just paid a guy to do this. Like before, I decided to go full race car. I was like, all right, whatever. I was like, let's just fix it. And, it'll be ready for the race. And, he brought it back to the shop and, the next day he's like, you got to go on eBay and buy a motor.
Oh no.
And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, you told me it was a head gasket. And so they had pulled the head off and it had actually dropped a valve.
Oh no.
And I just didn't know. Cause like that was the first time I had that happen. And I was like, yeah, it just sounded like a really bad misfire. And so, he's like, your motor is trash. He's like, go on eBay, buy a new one, make sure it gets here before Friday. And I was like, okay. I was like, not a great start to the season. Like the budget's already kind of going out the window. So I went on eBay and I hit buy it now. It was like in California. I called the guys up and I was like, can you get this on a pallet today? And they were like, yeah, girl. So it shows up. they the motor shows up and he throws it in. It goes to the dyno and so the whole thing made me really nervous before my first race because I think the motor went in like 3 days beforehand. So that's how I started. That's how I started my season, blowing a motor.
So then, did you just drop the engine in, or was it like tear it apart, look at it, thumbs up, then drop it in, or change anything?
There was no time to look at that. So that's why I called the junkyard. I was like, yo, what are the compression numbers on that? And they're like, oh yeah, it's like 180 across the board. And like, what am I going to do? Like, they've got this like rolled over Z3 and they're like, it's coming out of this thing. And I was like, okay, sure. It's like, send it to me.
What's the warranty?
Right. So Hugh was like, well, buy one that has a warranty because they never actually specify what's in that warranty. It's just like, if you blow it up within 30 days, you get your money back.
Right.
Or, you send it back, you get your money back. So he was like, okay, we don't have time. The race is next weekend. Go buy a motor that has a warranty on eBay. we'll throw it in. And, if it runs, it runs and we do well. And if it blows up, then you send it back and you get your money back and we'll try again.
Seems like a win-win scenario there. Just a lot of work.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm one of those people that plans things out and I need to know exactly what's going to happen. And so going into the first race of the season with that kind of mentality towards my motor, I was so nervous and I'm so used to it now. This is just normal for me now. I've got, eBay motors sitting at the shop. I'm whatever. If we blow one up, we'll just bring that one and we'll throw it in there. And if it runs, it runs. It's totally normal stuff now. But my first year as a racer, that was so overwhelming because I was I need every single little piece to be in the right spot. And racing just isn't like that. You just have to take what you get and make the best of it.
Right. So then, fast forward to last year where you had, because this is kind of where I wanted to go with this, you had a pretty awful accident last year and then thrashed to get another car ready. And that seems to be now the new norm. So I guess,
yes.
Do you mind talking about what happened? I mean, not,
yeah,
it's what happened to you is basically what everyone wishes never to happen to them.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to talk to someone that has had that awful experience, but then bounce back and is, in my opinion, is going to be stronger than ever.
Absolutely. So I sold my E36 in 2018 because I knew that I wanted to build an E46 M3. And I had bought an E46 M3 at the end of 2017. And this was a slow build process. This wasn't going to become an autocross car and be a street car. This was going straight to a race car. And so it was almost easier because it was just, like I said, just doing it right the first time. And so it took me probably about a year to build that between finishing up some races in the E36, selling it, finding the funds to really, really finish the E46 build. It took me about a year. And so the first time I drove that car was last year, 2019 in April. We took it to Summit Point, my first time ever driving the car, no testing. I did manage fourth place at the SCCA majors both days. So I'm pretty proud of that, never having driven that car before.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, and I had to start last on grid because I blew the sound limit, so I had to fight my way from the back of the pack. But so this was a brand new car for the 2019 season, and similar to previous years, we were out every single weekend. We were at Summit, we were at Pit Race, we were at VIR, we were at Jersey, we were back at VIR, we were at Watkins Glen, and I think in the 10 weeks that I had that car completed, I raced it 8 weekends.
Oh, wow.
So I think I only had 2 weekends off during that very short time of my ownership of that car. And on the 10th weekend, it actually started out really well. We went to Thompson. I had never been there before. And I picked up the track really, really fast. The locals were all there. And, Hugh and I went and we crushed and we did really well. He won the race. I was third. And people were like, "Oh, you've never been here before." I was like, "Yeah, but it's left, right, straight, brake. It's a
track.
The four. Yeah,
they're all very similar.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So we did really well as a high speed motorsports. P1, P3 is a good podium on Saturday and Sunday. My car got put into the wall by a competitor on the opening lap. And when I say put into the wall,
purpose?
I don't think so, to be honest. I really don't think it was on purpose. And I think there's a degree of poor driving involved, because this individual has many, many other previous incidents with other drivers, which I found out afterwards. But so we actually had the green flag waved off the first time we came around because he actually blew a start.
Oh, shoot.
He he blasted from the 8th row and cut through the entire field. And none of us had taken the green. But he started the race. But anyways, so we came around again and, we got the green this time, and halfway through the lap, I got pushed into concrete. On
a straight?
It was a straightaway. It was a straight portion of the track. It was
right.
And so there was concrete on the side. He moved over, and I'll be totally honest, I don't think I think he just either thought he was clear or didn't have any awareness that I was there. I don't think there was any malicious intent. I think there's just maybe a skill level that there's no awareness there.
Yeah, like not watching his mirrors, not just like focused on tunnel vision on what's in front. I'm following my line, nothing else matters type thing.
Yeah. So we actually made contact, like we touched, and I was kind of like, okay, like not a big deal, and I kept my wheel straight, and then he came over again. Oh, no. Because I was like, oh, well, if you touch a car, you usually recognize it, or at least there's a car there. And so I didn't move over to give him more space because I was like, we're on a straightaway. But he hit me again, and that's what sent my car sideways, and I had zero control. Like the second time he touched me, it was gone. I was at an angle, I was sliding, and I went head on into a concrete wall at, I think the aim data said like 101 miles an hour.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And like, did you get to a point where you're like, you knew there was no saving it? I think you kind of.
I knew the second time he touched me, and the minute I turned around, I was like, it's done. I was like, I'm hitting the wall. And, it's really interesting. Like I hope no one ever has to go through this, but like, it's just it's like part of the risk of racing. Like I knew that someday, somewhere, I was going to hit the wall, whether that was my fault, somebody else's fault, or, an act of God, and like lightning struck the track and sent my car flying into a tree. Like something was going to happen someday. This is it's a high risk hobby. It's a high risk sport. And it's part of why we all love it. It's an adrenaline junkie kind of thing. And if you pay attention to every single piece of safety equipment, whether it's a helmet, a Hans, a harness, every single one of those pieces of equipment comes with a warning that says motorsports is dangerous. You can die from this. And, we're all like, okay, it's not going to happen to us. But if you do it for long enough, you play the lottery for, enough times, you're going to hit the lottery, you're going to hit the wall. Hopefully it's not major. Unfortunately, in this case, I had probably one of the biggest crashes that a lot of people have ever seen. And so, I knew the minute that my car spun around, I was like, this is it. I was like, they always say, look where you want to go. And I took a look around, and it was this expanse of concrete wall next to the straightaway. And I was like, okay, I'm hitting the concrete wall today. And so I braced myself, because they always teach you this in DE. They say, take your hands off the steering wheel and cross your arms, because the last thing you want to do when you hit something straight on is have your hands on the steering wheel and break your thumbs, break your wrists. It happens even in, a regular street car. Mm-hmm. So that's, 101 miles an hour into the concrete wall. And actually the force rotated my car around, and I hit a second time. I hit the rear quarter panel because the force was so big. It got the car airborne, rotated around, and hit the rear quarter panel on its way down.
So instead of just having to fix one part, now it's just everything.
Yeah.
and there wasn't much left to fix. The picture you show, the whole front is destroyed, the wheels all mangled, and then the transmission tunnel and the body seams, they're all popped open. You got a cage, but even then, that's a little bit bent. It's a horrible accident. And
it was really bad. A lot of the flaggers, reached out afterwards, and they were like, "Holy crap! Like, we've never seen anything like that before." To be honest, when I was feeling it, it didn't feel that bad, and I was in my head before I hit the wall. It feels like time slows down when you're about to hit the wall. Like, I have very, very distinct thoughts that that are seared into my brain from those moments before I hit the wall. And I was like, oh, I got to call the body shop. I have to find front end parts. I should probably cut a new splitter before I go home tomorrow. And I don't know why I was thinking these things. It was just like, oh, and the one thing was like, oh, Jersey is next weekend. Like, oh, I'm not going to make Jersey. That sucks. And I guess I didn't realize just how bad that incident was going to be.
You said you're a planner in your day job?
Yeah.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, I wasn't dealing with oh, this is really going to hurt. It was just like, okay, how are we going to, take these next steps to get this whole thing fixed? So yeah, I'm a program manager for my day job, and the cogs were already turning before I hit the wall to how do I fix this? But
you didn't quite just walk away, but it wasn't as serious as it could have been. I guess what
Right.
what injuries did you have?
So I broke my foot, and I actually broke several bones in my foot. Initially, they thought I broke one bone, and the bone that they didn't find, actually they didn't find until November. And just for a frame of reference, this crash was in July. So I walked around on this broken foot for months. And I complained about pain, but like, you know, they were like, oh, your foot broke. Like, it's going to take time to heal. And I was like, okay, like whatever. But so, like I said earlier, when you're going to hit the wall, you know, you've hit a point of no return. Like there's some hard object that you're going to make contact with. Take those hands off the wheel, but also take your feet off the pedals. I was going 100 miles an hour. I had my foot on the brake. I had 2 feet in, just like they always teach you. But here's the thing. When you're going to hit something stationary, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, get that foot on. Like, my foot was on the brake pedal, and all of that force from going 101 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour went straight through my foot and shattered a bunch of bones.
Ow.
Yeah.
And then like, was it surgery or was it just a boot?
So the bone that they caught at the ER that they said was broken, they said, okay, this isn't really all that serious. Like, it's broken. Wear a walking boot for the next 6 weeks and, you know, go easy on it. And then, you know, wear a stiff-soled shoe. And they were like, you know, you can use crutches if you need to. It's fine. If they had caught the other broken bone, I honestly think they would have probably told me to be non-weight bearing, because that was what they eventually had me do when they found it in November. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad that I was able to just push through that pain and build a new car, because at least I have a car now. But yeah, it was the other bone that broke was pretty serious, and it's in your midfoot, so it basically helps you balance and walk and do all the important things. And so it was really tough, because I was like trying to keep fit while also recovering from that one broken bone. And so I was like trying to do yoga, but I wasn't able to balance, and I didn't know why. And then I was like busy on the weekends building a new car. So all of that did not help the fact that I had a second undetected broken bone. And it was broken in a weird way because of the impact. That surgery was really going to be risky. They were going to have to like cut open the bottom of my foot, and it was going to be like a 6-month heal time. Oh my gosh. Yeah. They were like, let's just try like some conservative treatment and, you know, go back in the walking boot and be non-weight bearing for like 4 months.
So is there like was there or is there any pain? Like, this is your right foot, correct?
Yes.
Yep. So is there any pain, like throttle, brake, anything like that?
So not anymore. And I'll say, you know, it's been 10 months since this crash now. And it's weird because like I still have pain in this foot, and I'm still doing physical therapy. The doctors said, you know, like I can drive no problem, but walking a mile is a different story.
Okay.
And so I'm clear to race, which is nice. I don't have any pain when I drive, but because this wasn't caught until after runoffs, I actually had a lot of issues at the runoffs with foot pain. And I had to the doctors. I was like, it still really, really hurts. And they were like, just rest it. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, I'll rest after the runoffs, after this car's built. And the worst part about runoffs was my last qualifying run. And it was like my last chance to just put down a time for the runoff. So you're given 3 days and 3 qualifying runs to put down your best time for runoffs. And my first 2 times driving the car for qualifying 1 and 2 were my first 2 times driving the brand new car. And so I was not entirely comfortable with a car that I had rushed to build. And, most of that was just testing stuff to make sure nothing was going to fall off. So that third qualifying, I went for it, and I matched my previous best, but there was that one time I went for the brake pedal on the back straight going 152 miles an hour, and there was lightning pain that went through my foot, and it was that bone, getting tweaked because it wasn't healed. And it happened a couple times during the runoffs, but luckily I think the rain race helped because, everything was just a little bit more gentle,
Yep.
All of our inputs. But yeah, I raced on a broken foot. So I would not recommend that, like a 0 to 10 recommendation to anybody.
Yeah, that would be awful. Well, then your confidence is going to be completely screwed up because you go into a turn just wrong, you're going to have flashbacks to hitting the wall, or if you go to take the break and all of a sudden you have a pain shoot up your leg, you're going to hesitate. So I like that. I mean, just the mental game of having the confidence or the mental strength to just push through that pain, or be able to look past anything of that, that flashback type stuff, PTSD or whatever you want to call it, that would put you back in that bad state. I mean, that's a lot to overcome. We'll jump backwards on how you even got to there, but like, was there anything you did that helped build that confidence back, or was it more of just I'm just going to go for it?
I just had to go for it. So in between the crash and the runoffs, I was building the car. There was no chance for me to do any testing before getting to the runoffs. We finished the car at the runoffs, like literally minutes before qualifying. And so there was really no time for me to even think in between that to like get myself ready. And it was like, what am I going to do? So I just had to go for it. And I'll be honest, I had my own hesitations just because I was like, okay, there was an unaware driver that took me out. And I was like, what if that happens again? Like, what if I have a lot of these like what ifs, and it drives Hugh nuts because I'm always like, what if this? And I had a lot of those what ifs, and taking the green at runoffs was really scary to me because there was zero visibility. It was pouring. Nobody could see anything. And I was like, what if one of these people blows a start again and barrels to the field or does something? I was like, it just takes one person in the rain for us to all go flying off into the grass. And I think I held my breath from when we got before we got the green through turn one. And then I realized I was like, we're not just racing any old chumps here. Like, these guys who made it to the runoffs, these guys are the real deal. These are the guys who are the best of the best in club racing, and the runoffs is where you go to strut your stuff. So, we're not racing, amateur drivers. You have pro racers who come with their own personal race cars to, show their stuff. And, once we got through turn one, I was reminded of hey, I'm racing against the best of the best, and I'm here because I've earned my spot here. So after that, I totally forgot about all of my apprehensions. And I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's get to work. And, I think it really just, I had to get through that first turn in order to forget all of that. I will say that before, driving on the street, I still see, I still have flashbacks to that crash where if there's a driver next to me and you can tell they're texting and driving and totally unaware, not watching the road, or if someone, makes a lane change and you know that they haven't looked. As racers, who's looking, who's texting, who's watching the road. And sometimes I see that and I'll have a flashback and I'm like, oh, this person's going to send me off this bridge and into the river. So I don't know. I think that when you experience something that big, it's normal. And I have less of that as I go on and as I did the race, and I think that helped a lot in terms of the PTSD that I was experiencing after that crash. Makes sense. And then did you do well? I did okay. So I qualified 13th. I think there was a field of 19. And I qualified 13th and I finished 12th. So I made up one spot in the race. It probably in my racer's mind, right? I'm like, well, if it was sunny, I would have done better, right? Of course. But I think you're only as good as your last race, and my last race at the runoffs, I was 12th, and so that was my spot I earned. I think I'm still really proud of that finish, even though I was like, okay, let me try for a top 10 for my first ever runoffs. But I think just the efforts in making it there and everything that the team and friends and sponsors put into that car, I'm so proud of everything that we did. Just making it there felt like a win. And I will definitely be back at the runoffs to improve on my finish for this year. That's awesome. And then is runoffs, I was kind of looking through the results. Is it just a handful of qualifying and one race? Or is it a weekend of races? So it's like a week-long celebration, kind of like how Lincoln was.
Yes.
It is like a week-long celebration. It is the best thing ever. So this was my first ever runoffs. I attended Indy just like as a spectator, and that's when I knew like I want to do this in the future. And so that's when I built the E46. But it is a week-long party with your friends, with your competitors. It's the best thing ever. So it starts off with like testing, and people, you know, they start with their testing like a week early, and you basically have to live at, you know, whatever track it is for like a week and a half. And everyone has their spot, or, you know, their camper, and it starts off with testing. And if, you know, you're lucky enough where you can afford the testing, I think some of the early days were like really expensive, and it gradually gets a little bit cheaper. But it's testing for a couple days, and then it goes straight into qualifying, and it's 3 days of qualifying. Each day, every group gets one shot at it. So
oh wow,
you have 3 days, but you only have 3 shots, one shot each day, and so you really have to make it count, because like the first day it was like kind of raining, and I was like, oh, okay, not a big deal. I need to like figure out the car anyways. But you know, when you get to that third day and you're kind of like, oh, I haven't put down a good time yet, then you're like, okay, let's throw on the sticker Hoosiers. Like let's get down to business. And luckily that's what I was able to do. You know, the first 2 qualifying days for me were mostly testing my brand new build, untested. And then the third day it was get down to business. You know, you have 15 minutes, let's go do this. And so I put down a decent qualifying time. So I was really happy with that. And then after that, there's 3 days of racing, 3 or 4 days. And they split you know, every class has its own group. And so you're only on track with your class, which is really nice. So we were like last to go on Sunday. So we got to relax. And watch the rest of the racing. And it was cool because, like, you know, you get to talk to people and make new friends. I met a bunch of people that, you know, I'm friends with on Instagram, and I follow their racing. I just never had the chance to meet them. And people come from across the country. So it's just this one big celebration. And SCCA does a really great job bringing everyone together. They have these community dinners. Manufacturers come in and they do, you know, manufacturer dinners. Like Honda did a dinner, Mazda does a dinner. So it's really cool to see everybody.
That's awesome. Time Trials National was kind of that way too, where it was just, you know, as soon as the track goes cold, it's like, you know, we're doing, you know, a big cookout and everyone's invited, and it's like a big party, and we're all playing like tailgating games, stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot of fun. But we skipped over it, and I think it's like a huge deal. So you have your accident, and then you have roughly 60 days to make it to the runoffs, and and at this point, do you know you have a car? Do you think you can fix the car? I guess, how do you go from that awful accident to 60 days, I'm going to have a car ready for the runoffs?
So about 15 hours after I hit the wall. So I was taken to the ER, actually. This was my first time also riding in the ambulance. Like, they took me to the ER. I never made it back to the track. And like, we had to get friends up north to like help tow the cars back. So I got picked up from the ER, and we went back to so High Speed Motorsports is pretty close to Thompson. It's about an hour away. And we went back to the shop, and, you know, we're like, all right, let's go to sleep and let's deal with this in the morning. And so actually, let me turn the light on. Oh.
I noticed that as the conversation's going on, and I was like, we're losing daylight.
So like first thing in the morning, I'm like up at 8:00, and I'm like, we have to take this car to the body shop. And I'm like trapped in this boot, and I'm like on crutches, and he was like, okay, slow your roll. And I was like, no, we have to go to the body shop. I was like, I already called in sick to work. And I was like my real job, like I like kind of explained to them what I'm doing, but like they didn't really understand the gravity of the situation. I was like, look, I'll be in tomorrow. And they were like, okay, no problem. So I was like, Hugh, we have to go to the body shop. So he's like, okay, we're going to the body shop. He's like, let's go to the shop and let's take some panels off so the body shop can see what's going on. And so we would take like the hood off, the fender, like you can see in the pictures, like it's all crunched up. And, you know, Hugh has fixed a lot of cars. Like, he has fixed a lot of customer cars. The other year he fixed my friend's car. He chopped off the rear half of the E46 and welded another half of an E46 to it, because it got backed into a wall. And it's cool to see how he does this stuff.
Right.
Whereas like I think a lot of people would probably start over or give up on a car. So like, I knew like I had the best person in my corner to help me with this car. And he looks at me and he's like, Christina, it's not looking good. And I was like, no, we're going to the body shop. So we go to the body shop, and the body shop's like, you messed this one up pretty good.
You made this one count.
Yeah. And they're like, look, we can fix this, but like, it's probably like cost-wise not going to be worth it. Then they're like, we need a new quarter panel from Germany. We don't know when that's going to come in. It takes 6 weeks to get them. And they're like, all of the factory seams were busted open. And so, within 2 days, we got quotes back. Someone at the track already like was kind of looking at the carcass not too long after the tow truck dropped it off, and they sent us like an unsolicited quote. They were like, oh, we can straighten the frame for $10,000. And I was like, excuse me. But like, our body shop was like, look, we can put this thing back together for like, 8 or 9, and like you'll get new panels and everything. And they're like, but to be totally honest, like it's not going to be worth it.
I'll say it's never the same. Like, I mean, you could get it close. Like a salvage car is never the same. So I mean,
it's never the same.
You could get it back, but it might not be worth it.
Yeah. So, and like the cage was also bent in it. So the dash bar, a bunch of the bars were actually bent in the impact, and that creates like a spring effect. So even when you try to straighten the cage out, if you cut a bar out, it's now got a spring effect in the rest of the cage because there's pressure. And so it made the whole thing like a total nightmare. And so it became, okay, like let's start over and let's find a shell. And, I think credit really goes to Hugh, who was pushing me along, because I was kind of at a loss. I was like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, it's fine, Christina. Like, we can just get a new car. And like, he told me it was going to be easy. He was like, it'll be easy. We'll transfer all the parts over. And I was like, okay, like I trust this guy with my life. And so I was like, okay, we could do that. And it took a while to find a new car. And during this time, like I was uninstalling parts, like there was like, brakes on the right side that I could salvage. But like, as I was taking parts off, I was like, Hugh, that whole thing with like moving parts over to the new car. I was like, all these parts are broken. And he was like, well, you better order some new parts. So there was a lot more broken on the car than I think either of us anticipated.
What were you able to save?
I saved the wheels and the tires on the right side and the brakes on the right side.
Interior stuff, like seats and stuff? And that's about it?
The seat, so the seat was actually fine, but my seat was actually expiring. And because it was a front impact hit, my seat actually didn't take any of the force. My belts did, so I had to replace the belts. Yep. I got a new helmet, new bell helmet, RS7 carbon's really nice. I had to replace the straps on my Hans. We threw away everything basically.
Yeah. Now that you think about it, that's a one-use thing. So you used them.
Yep. And so, I mean, that also goes back to safety. I'll always buy the best safety you can afford. And that's always been my motto, right? Do it once, do it right. Buy the best that you can afford. So if you can, like, spring for that nicer helmet, get the lighter one, because when you are in an impact, think about like physics, right? Like F equals ma, force equals mass times velocity. Like the mass is your head plus your helmet. So pay for that nicer helmet that weighs a little bit less, and it won't be as painful. Yep.
No, I splurged on my Hans device, and I've never regretted it. Like, I got a really good deal on my helmet, but I was really happy with it. But like same thing when it's a 2010, so when the 2020s come out, I'm definitely going for the extra one, the carbon one, the one.
Oh yeah.
So it's worth it.
Absolutely. So yeah, we had a shell within a couple of weeks. It took me a while to find like a good shell. But after that, it was just like, I never really questioned whether or not we were going to make it. It was just, okay, we're building this car and we're going to go. Like, we're going to go to the runoffs. It wasn't always easy, but I think my sheer stubbornness of we're just going to do this helped me get through it, just because I never doubted the fact that we couldn't make it. And I think in part we had a lot of support from the community. There was outpouring support once people saw what happened and they heard what happened. It, like, people had been following that build for a year. So people felt emotionally invested in this thing too. And, like my phone was blowing up and they were like, what do you need? Like I have an extra set of wheels. Like I have an extra, brake booster. Like, do you need it? And I was like, yes. I was like, I literally need everything. So like, friends were donating, a couple spare parts, my transponder. So I had one of those hardwired non-subscription transponders, which got smashed in the crash.
Of course.
These things are worth their weight in gold.
They're so expensive. Even the subscription ones aren't cheap.
Yeah. So I bought the non-subscription one like right before I think the prices started going up on them. Like I snagged mine for like $300, but I was like looking at them and they were like $650. Yeah. Yep. So someone at the shop like saw what happened and he was like, oh, I don't race anymore. He's like, but I've got one of those transponders. Like, I'll bring it by next time I'm at the shop. And, so like a lot of friends, were willing to like donate pieces here and there. And it was incredible. Like just the amount of help that we got on this car. The cage in my new car is actually really special. So TC Design, Tony owns that out in California, and I've followed that shop for a very long time. He does a lot of welding, and he called and said, "Hey, like, can I help build a cage for your new car?" And I was like, "You live in California. You live on the wrong coast." And he's like, "Wait, I have this idea." He's like, "I have an E46 at the shop. I can bend all the same bars. I can ship them over, and while this is happening, we're working on the cars." And he's like, I was thinking about just coming out for a weekend and welding it together. And I was like, what? Because usually, high speed's pretty busy. And so like in the middle of summer, we're pretty swamped with stuff. And
right.
Hugh's already putting in overtime to help me with this thing. And he's like, a cage would probably take about a week for us to put together. And so I was like, a TC Design cage in my car. I was like, that's pretty badass. And so I have a cage that was bent in California, shipped across the country, and then welded together in a day and a half at High Speed Motorsports.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like really, really cool stuff that happened on this car. Just from like our friends and sponsors to try to help us make it to the runoffs. Like, I don't think anyone doubted that we were going to make it. Like, we were just going to make it, but it's just really cool to like have them watch and be like, hey, let's come help for a weekend and see what we can get done. So we have some really cool stories and, a bunch of new friends out of this whole thing too.
Yeah, that's incredible. I can see just like you would, if you would post something like, hey, I need this. And then all of a sudden it shows up the next day. I mean, that's an incredible aspect of this, of like social media and like just the sport in general that, I've seen it a few times in the last year or so where it's just like, even with my car, like, hey, I need a power steering line for this, LS and a 240 setup. Oh yeah. I'll mail it tomorrow. All right. What do you want for it? Hey, just send me something. What?
Yeah. Like shipping. Give me a beer next time I see you. Yeah.
All right. I'll send you a box of goodies, I guess. And then, yeah, it blows me away at how supportive a lot of, just not strangers, but like people you or just acquaintances that are following, that have taken interest in your car, or like you, for example, too, like taking interest in your racing. It's just like, I want to be a part of that. So then, yeah, they make it happen too.
Yeah. And I think some of the best people in the community are people who just want to see other people succeed. I think those people are really rare, but in the motorsports community, I think I've met more than anywhere else in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have taken up way more of your time than I was expecting, and I'm also only halfway through the list of questions that I've had. Because
we can do part 2, man.
I think we're gonna have to, but we can kind of wrap this up. I'll ask. I think I already know the answer. What would be your proudest moment in your racing career so far?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if it boils down to one moment, and I think that whatever moment I tell you today will not be the same a month from now or 2 months from now. My thing is that I always want to go out and be proud of my last drives. And so no matter what happens, I think my proudest moment is always going to be my last race weekend that I did, no matter what those results are, because I've put all of my heart and soul into my car, my results, everything about it. So actually after runoffs, I did do another race weekend, and I actually won that one. It was kind of like redemption for my less than, I wasn't really satisfied with my 12th place finish at runoffs, even though I was like really, really proud of our efforts. So it was good to like finish off the season with a win. And it was good to like, I think so far the biggest thing would probably just be this latest car in general. Everything that we've done, created, and just all the help that we've gotten along the way. I'm proud of everybody's efforts on this car.
And then is there any like sponsors or special people that you need to like, or don't need to, but like want to give some shout outs to and that deserve to be get some praise for all the help that they've done?
Absolutely. Hugh Stewart at High Speed Motorsports, thank you for not giving up on me and always pushing me to be better. And I think he makes me a nicer person. But he's always looking for me to be the best that I can be. And if someday that means like he wants me to be faster than him, I think it's really hard to find people who are willing to admit that they want you to be better than they are. But I feel like he always puts 100% of his heart and soul into every single weekend that we are out there, whether if it's supporting me or, being in his car next to me and we're racing alongside each other. He has been the backbone of all of this. And, he's the whole reason I probably got this whole thing, this whole car up and running again, because he was like, it'll be easy. We'll just move parts over to the new car. But yeah, huge thank you to Hugh Stewart. Tony from TC Design for flying a red eye across the country to help build a really badass cage. And I'm really proud to show off to everybody my TC Design cage in my new car. To Stop Tech for my really nice brakes. I helped test these brakes for Stop Tech on my first E46, and we actually put them into production after a lot of testing. And so I've got a new set on the new car since the other ones got destroyed. But it's really cool to do a lot of these projects with people. And everyone else who helped in the car. Nova Graphics that wrapped my car in the paddock of runoffs in 3 hours. They did livery design and a full vinyl wrap. So my car, looked the part when it showed up to grid for its first ever race. Nine Lives Racing, everyone who is involved in this car. Oh, and my good friend Doug, who has been there for my 4 a.m. Working on the car. He's been there in my garage, wrenching on my car with me. He owns Racing Harness Tech, and he does motorsports ABS. So he actually outfits a lot of cars in Grid Life and SCCA with motorsports ABS. Really, really pumped to have his ABS system with my Stop Tech brakes. Awesome. It sounds like you got a lot of incredible support, and that's it's incredible to have that type of support and be able to do what you've been doing, and they continue to get you back out there. And then where can people find you? You can find me online. So my handle is the same for just about everything. It's at Christina Y. Lam. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. LinkedIn, Facebook. I've got all of the social media stuff. YouTube, you can follow for like race videos. I do some like install videos sometimes. I'll probably try to do more of that and more like at track stuff, not just like in car videos. So if you guys want, just let me know what you guys want to see and throw some more content out there. Really looking forward to a really good season.
Perfect, and we'll be following along, and I think we're going to have you on probably later at the end of this year and see how it went. Yeah, looking forward to it. All right. Well, you have a good night. Thanks. You too, man. Yeah. See ya. All right, that's our show. I want to thank Christina for taking the time to come on, tell us all about her racing, and we wish her the best of luck. We hope to have a 100% full recovery here and that she can be back out racing and have no sort of issues with her leg or anything like that. I want to thank James from Kango Motorsports for basically putting our paths together, inadvertently, really. And if you want to follow James for all his Spec Racer Forward, his how-to videos, articles, everything, head over to kangomotorsports.com. We also want to thank Factory Fabrication for their continued support. If you need any sort of unique residential, commercial, basically any sort of fabrication work, head over to factoryfabrication.com. Reach out to Booney. He would be happy to hear from you and see what he could make for you. And we also want to thank Apex Pro for our continued support from them. I think Christina Lam actually is an Apex Pro racer as well. If she still is, I believe she has a discount code basically the same as ours. But if you want to use ours, go to apextrackcoach.com, but put the unit in your cart, use the code 10tenths, and get a free suction mount. Again, we want to thank everybody, and that's our show. We'll hope to be back for you next week.